welcome to another episode of The Day Show, hosted by me, Trevor Day. Today I want to take a deeper dive into industrial ideas of the late 19th century. So in this episode, we will be covering the AP World History topic of the Second Industrial Revolution, featuring special guests of the day, Grace Holbrook and Hailey Conerton. They are here to help me further explore technological advancements, consequences of industrialization, as well as reactions to the industrial global economy of the Second Industrial Revolution.
Hello, Trevor.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely. So how about we begin with a brief synopsis of what this revolution is all about?
Well, the Second Industrial Revolution was from 1870 to 1914. It was also referred to as the Technological Revolution because of the technological advancements in steel, railroads, electricity, and petroleum. This opposed the First Industrial Revolution, which focused on textiles, steam power, and iron.
Awesome. Now, Grace, my first question to you is how did advancements in transportation and communication affect trade, migrations, and global interaction?
Well, luckily good things came out of transportation and communication advancements. Railroads allowed bulky items to be transferred faster and cheaper to different places. Newer and advanced steamships could carry goods greater distances and more cheaply because they were faster and more durable. Goods could be shipped directly to the Atlantic without local bartering systems being used. Communication advancements like the telegraph also helped with trade by allowing producers to keep track of distant consumer needs and prices, which made markets more efficient and profits more dependable. In the 1850s, submarine telegraph cables connected continents by connecting stations underwater, which encouraged trade and helped with shipping and business. There was an increase in migration. Railroads allowed people to move faster, cheaper, and more comfortable around cities and towns, while cheap steamboats let people migrate more easily to the U.S. Many immigrants moved to cities for better opportunities and jobs, like with the railroads and steamboats. At the end of the 19th century, electric streetcars and subways also allowed people to move farther away from their jobs. Communication with telegraphs, radios, and telephones allowed information about jobs needed in the U.S. to spread, which made European immigrants migrate over to North America for a new opportunity. Faster and efficient steamboats connected continents by encouraging trade. The telegraph and Morse code allowed for countries all over the world to communicate and send messages in minutes instead of days. The transatlantic cable was laid in 1866, which later on ended up connecting the whole globe. The telephone was made in 1876, which allowed people to talk to others in other states and countries. Lastly, radios in the late 1890s and early 1900s allowed news to spread quickly around the world.
All right, Grace, thanks for the information about how transportation and communication affect trade, migrations, and global interaction. Hailey, my first question for you is, how would you compare socialism and capitalism during this time?
Well, while capitalism and socialism are both major economic systems created in early modern Europe, they're complete opposites. The government role of capitalism is individual ownership, but socialism is a system of government ownership. First of all, capitalism consists of large financial organizations such as banks, stock exchanges, and investing companies, in which trade and industry are managed by private investors. The purpose of capitalism is to gain profit. It is often called a free market economy because of minimal government involvement. The common types of capitalism include industrial, commercial, and mercantile. 19th century industrial capitalism was based on machine production, and it is still prominent today in the 21st century. Often, capitalists strive for the most efficient production, therefore capitalism posed the downsides of long hours, poor working conditions, low wages, unemployment, and child labor. Workers responded to 19th century industrial capitalism issues by forming labor unions and socialism. While capitalism focused on innovation and investment to increase wealth, socialism was more oriented towards a political ideology. Socialists supported government protection of workers from exploitation by property owners and government ownership of industries. Socialism began with two types, utopian and revolutionary. Utopian socialists were against revolution. Revolutionary socialists believed working-class revolutions would end capitalism. However, socialism has yet to supplant capitalism. During the Second Industrial Revolution, Marxist socialism was a communist variation that was most popular. Founded by Karl Marx, who strongly influenced the 20th century and advocated revolution, Marx socialists believed in the class struggle between workers and the capitalists. The workers demanded higher wages for their labor, but the capitalists wanted cheap labor. The opposition between capitalism and socialism continued to grow and create more individual parties for each side.
Awesome. Thanks for the information about capitalism and socialism, Hailey.
Okay, Trevor, now I have a question for you. What were the advancements in new industries, specifically steel, chemicals, and electricity, that led to new possibilities in production?
There were many advancements in these three areas that led to increased production. In the steel industry, there were actually two innovations combined, which led to the availability of cheaper steel, meaning larger bridges, railroads, skyscrapers, and ships. There was the Bessemer process, which increased the scale and speed of production of metal while decreasing labor requirements. Following that was the Siemens-Martin process, which regenerated heat, saving up to 70 to 80% of the fuel. In the area of chemicals, there was the discovery of synthetic dye by an English chemist named William Henry Perkin in 1856. This became commercialized and led to the invention of more dyes around the world, as well as more factories producing dyes. In the field of electricity, there were a few developments. Scientist Michael Faraday's work with electromagnetics became the basis for the practical use of electricity in technology, whilst Joseph Swan invented the incandescent light bulb. In 1891, the first modern power station was built in London, and once the consumers could access this electricity, there were great advancements for factory workers in the areas of the assembly line and mass production. Really, the spread of electricity was the most important engineering achievement of the 20th century because the new electric lights improved working conditions in factories and lessened the amounts of gases being consumed by the workers.
Wow, I never thought about how protection came into place.
Alright, Grace, what were the reactions to industrialization involving women's suffrage, public education, and labor movements?
After industrialization, women worked in stores, offices, and schools, but were paid less than men. In the end of the 19th century, suffragists fought prostitution, child labor, alcohol, and male dominance. In 1871, the American Woman Suffrage Association was formed to get women the right to vote. In 1914, women gained the right to vote by the 19th Amendment being passed. With public education, girls were being taught embroidery, drawing, music, and skills that enhanced their marriage prospects and social graces. Boys, however, were being taught of the business world or other professions. Education became more technical, especially for boys, because the machines had been made and people needed to know how to use them. In the 1880s, labor movement started because factories, mines, and mills were not safe to work in, but the government didn't care and didn't do anything about it. People came together to form labor unions and went on strikes for better wages, safer working conditions, reasonable working hours, to end child labor, provide aid to injured or retired workers, and to get health benefits. Sometimes the strikers were violent between the workers and employees. There were definitely strikes regarding labor because in the primary source, the Albany Argers, a newspaper hosted in New York, had articles written in July 1877 talking about strikes in the north of the United States. Pennsylvania, Baltimore, and Ohio were some examples of places where these strikes were held. Employees working on railroads in Pennsylvania went on a strike because business had been down recently and they wanted to leave work early but weren't allowed to. In Baltimore and Ohio, people's pay went down 10%, which angered them greatly. Violence around different states and cities took place, which caused people to get injured and for buildings to be destroyed.
Awesome, Grace. Great information on women's suffrage, public education, and labor movements. Go.
Okay, Trevor, can you expand on Grace's response by describing the hazards of industrial life, including pollution, overcrowding, poor working conditions, and child labor? Also explain how this impacted life at the time in industrial world.
Well, the working conditions during the Second Industrial Revolution were really hazardous and life was tough. Workers didn't have rights, and factory workers conducted menial, repetitive tasks, oftentimes under dangerous working conditions, working 12-hour shifts with minimal break time. In fact, between 1880 and 1900, an average of 35,000 American workers died every year in factories and mining accidents. Steam engines made the already hot factories even hotter, making the workers sluggish and more prone to accidents. Plus, the factories lacked proper lighting and cleanliness. The machinery at the time had a lot of exposed moving parts, and they would often employ children because they were small to fit between tightly pack machines. These kids many times didn't attend school since so many families relied on the extra income. Also, the air quality inside the factory was full of harmful fumes and toxins, most likely resulting in illnesses. Because of the depressions of the 1870s and 1890s, workers didn't make much money, about $1.25 per day for unskilled workers, while women, immigrants, and children received less than half that amount. So you can see what an incredible impact industrialization had on life at the time.
All right, Trevor, my last question for you is, what were the steps that the newly created state of Germany used to become the industrial rival of Great Britain, and how did it help promote industry within its borders?
Well, Grace, there are a few things that Germany used to grow as an industrial giant and rival Great Britain. Economically speaking, they had plenty of iron and coal resources, which are the basic ingredients for industrial development, but they also had a disciplined and educated workforce, which helped their economy. Plus, they had a rapidly growing population from 41 million in 1871 to 67 million by 1914, which provided a huge home market along with a larger supply of industrial workers. In the 1850s and 1860s, Germany saw the growth of many large companies and the building of railroads. The dynasty of the Krupp family became an enormous industrial complex who were known for their production of steel and weapons for the world market. Also, business tycoon August Thyssen built a small steel factory of 70 workers in 1871, which grew into a giant empire of 50,000 employees by 1914. On the scientific front, inventor Carl Zeiss built a company known for its telescopes, microscopes, and other optical equipment, and in general, Germany developed new products using science like synthetic chemicals and plastics. Plus, their government issued a single currency, reorganized the banking system, and promoted economic unity, which all were factors in them becoming an industrial giant. Hailey, discuss ways that industrialization impacted imperialism in the 19th century.
Okay, Trevor. Well, during the Second Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, industrialization made imperialism possible. Europe's technological superiority allowed its imperial powers to dominate other parts of the world, including Africa, China, and India. Their industrialization and nationalism provided the motivation and means for imperialism. The development of quinine medicine, the Maxim machine gun, and steamships were major developments that allowed imperialist powers to dominate. One of the strongest imperializers was Britain. After the Opium War, the British gained control of Hong Kong and Chinese trading ports. They also practiced extraterritoriality rights. And by the 19th century, the majority of Africa and Asia was controlled by European powers. Europeans controlled their colonies through indirect rule because it was easier and cheaper, and often forced local rulers to power with their advanced military technology. Even though European nations were more involved in 19th century imperialism, the U.S. also participated, showing how the influence of expanding Western corporations increased. Industrialized nations imposed economic integration on developing nations because this allows them to extract value which reflects to profit. While native diseases, weapons, and people of Africa and other regions halted further European domination, Europeans' advanced technologies allowed the Europeans to resist expanding imperialism.
Awesome, Hailey. Great points on how industrialization impacted imperialism in the 19th century. Thanks to our special guests, Hailey and Grace, we learned how the world was brought together through communication and transportation, economic systems of capitalism and socialism, industrial advancements in new industries, reaction to industrialization, hazardous working lifestyles, impact on imperialism, and the process of German unification. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Day Show. Have a great day.